Keith, I want to ask you where you were when World War II ended.
Mm. Now that is a day that I'll never forget in my whole life. I worked at a little neighborhood grocery store called the California Street Market, and the reason they call it that because it was on California Street and it was a market. Now, that sounds reasonable. I was a stock boy, and I was putting. In those days, we used black pens or markers to put the numbers on the can. And I had a large can of beets, and it was 16 cents. And I was just marking it. I'll go back just a little bit. All day long, we'd had the radio on in the store. And of course, you have to remember there was no such thing as television back in those days. So we'd had the radio on all day in the store because the Philippines were being liberated, and the internment camp Britann had had the death march the day before, and we had friends from our hometown that were in Britann in the death march actually, which was it never happened because the paratroopers, the American paratroopers, paratrooped right into the camp, and the prisoners were liberated. And so we had had this on all day long, the radio, and it would get down to the M's, and then the time would run out, and so 15 minutes later they would start again with the A's and get to the M's, and so we never really got down the list, and all of a sudden they interrupted the whole thing, and they said Hirohito has just signed the armistice and the war is over. Now mind you, we had been in war for 4.5 years or so. San Francisco had been in blackout all that time. If you went into the city, you couldn't use your lights when you drove, and we had blackouts continuously. And you have to remember the technology back then with planes and things, they didn't just come in on radar and different methods of navigation like they do today. But of course, I was too young to go into the city, but everything closed down, and everybody in our area, the town, went down to or up to San Francisco. And I guess it was the lights went on, and parties in the street. They pushed trolleys off their track, and everybody was, well, I guess pretty wild. But the thing that impressed me even more than all of that, of course, that was wonderful because I knew that my brother was in the South Pacific at that time in the Army and on New Caledonia. And so I knew that meant Richard would be coming home. And so I walked into the living room at home, and my mother was sitting there crying. And I said, "Why are you crying? The war's over." And that was the first time I ever realized, I guess consciously realized anyway, people cry when they're happy as well as when they're sad, you know. And so that was quite an eye-opener for me. But yes, that was a very important day. And years later, actually was on my 50th high school reunion, which was of course in Mountain View also. We went back there for the reunion, and going past the little store, Sherry said to me, "We've got to go in." And I said, I have no reason to go in. But so we went into the store, and nothing, Mountain View is a historic site, so they can't change anything much. So we went in and we met the owners, and they wanted to know all about when I was a little boy working there. I was a delivery boy. I had a little trailer on the back of my bicycle, and people would call in and order their groceries, and I'd jump on my bicycle and take them to their home. And that was quite an exciting little job I had there. But anyway, the day the war ended, it was very spectacular, and the way it happened, I can still remember I was holding the can and writing 16 cents on it. And I knew that my cousins were, some of them were in Alaska and some of them were in Burma, some of them were in Germany, and they would all be coming home. So it was pretty exciting.